The following is a brief demonstration of the Stakeware Trust Measurement Platform. In this example, we'll be looking at a case study of a police department that wants to monitor the trust in the communities that they serve. We start by looking at a trends analysis that's looking at publicly available social media and is trying to infer the author's expressed attitude towards the police and police activity. The idea is to try to understand general expressions of sentiment about the police, comments about the police encounters in the author's own life or those of his friends and family, comments on local news, or comments on national news. So what you're looking at here is the aggregate of all these comments separated by positive sentiment and negative sentiment. The natural language processing system that we have operationalizes these questions through a two-step approach. The first is topic filtering. In here, we infer whether a message is talking about the police or any of the issues that you see below. The second is sentiment polarity. And here we're trying to infer the magnitude of positive or negative sentiment that's expressed towards the police. It will then calculate an aggregate trust score by averaging these inferred polarities, and this represents the sentiment as expressed by online authors in their messages. If we can go over here, the trust score basically can be broken down by time or location when there's enough data. So for example, in this dashboard, we divided the data by neighborhood. So here you see that neighborhood N1, or that's the bit number, has an average trust score of 45. But if we change to, let's say, neighborhood N3, we see that the trust score changes, the key topics that people are talking about change, the number of documents that were analyzed change. So the idea is that once you have all this data that you can organize in the form of trust or trust metrics, you can localize it to the point where you can benchmark different neighborhoods to see which neighborhoods require more resources or which issues require more attention. Here in the lower part, we actually are able to see a network of stakeholders for that particular neighborhood, and we can see the different relationships that exist based on what's been captured from these different groups in terms of their social media platforms. Now, if we go over here, once we have identified the stakeholders, we've identified the issues, and now we want to basically put it all together. So here on the right, I have the main issues for the police. And let's say I'm going to drop the vibrant neighborhood issue. Here I can see actually I can divide my stakeholders into external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. So on the top of this quadrant you would see external stakeholders, and on the lower part you would see internal stakeholders. And here on the x-axis we're actually looking at the level of intensity. So for example, those stakeholders that you have more than 100 meetings with will be considered high intensity stakeholders. So here we basically have an opportunity to look at these different groups and see, for example, that group over here, it's made out of community stakeholders, and you can see all the different interactions, the level of intensity of the different relationships. And the same over here, when you're looking at the group of government, we can actually see how many meetings they had, who were the people that were participating in those meetings, and what were they talking about. So here, for example, is the elected officials group page where you can have all the information pertaining to that particular relationship or any stakeholder that falls under that group. You can send direct messages, you can record emails, conversations, or look at it from different perspectives. Now, if we come back over here, what we're actually looking at is also some of the metrics that will define the different types of stakeholders. So for example, We know that if you're looking at a quadrant that is low intensity internal stakeholders, they would have a higher level of trust, or they would put more weight to the managerial competence of the agency. And that's different from what the external stakeholders, like the community, would actually put a different emphasis on a different type of metric. So the idea is that we can combine these metrics to come back with a score that can generally give you an opportunity to benchmark and target the engagement in such a way that you can be more effective. The last thing that I would say is that we also have the ability to organize messages in the user interface in a timeline that can be useful, particularly when you're trying to understand the evolution of certain issues. And this is something that's part of a research that's coming from, cutting edge research that's coming out of University of Massachusetts at Amherst, that has identified that timeline-based interfaces can actually enhance the user insight. So this is a brief demonstration of the Stakeware software. I'd be happy to provide more details at the appropriate time. Thank you.